Okay. Just now we have seen how to update an existing row. How to update a existing row using a result set which is updatable. Okay. Just to update the existing row, we switch to the specific position, either using absolute or relative or any way. By any way, we switch to the specific position and just we execute the update methods, update string or update int or update double or any methods, okay, and with the specific columns. Okay, we may not need to all update all the columns. We may need to only update the specific columns. Just we'll specify the columns and the values that we want to update, and we execute update row. Understood? That's how we need to update. Now, if you want to insert the row, we have some specific methods. Even I don't remember those methods. Let us see. Oh. First, if you want to insert a row, first what we need to do is, we need to call a method move to insert row. The first thing to insert a row, we need to call a method move to insert row. Okay. Now we need to set the values. Rs dot set in top. What is the first value? What is the ID? ID is, let me make it 900, like 255. The second column is name. Sorry, it's not set, it's, I think we have insert int also. I'm not sure, let me see. So we should execute the same methods, update int. Update int, the first position is, the ID is 255 and the second value is, the second column value is name, okay, and the name is, and issue, and the age is third column, age, which is a third column, and the value is 13. Okay, so, and again like this, insert row. That's it. Just to, we want to insert row, first we need to call move to insert row and set the values using update methods. What is the first column value, second column value, third column value, fourth column value, fifth column value, like that. We need to set all the values Once we set the values, we execute insert row. That's it. Okay. Now, have you written it down? If you want, you can write it down. This is how we can insert a row using updatable result set. Just call bool insert row, set the values of all the columns and execute insert row. That's it. Okay. Oh, so this is how we can insert a row. Let me see how it goes. It's a double D. This spelling mistake. So let's compile. Go to the classes, execute the application. So it has iterated the row. It has iterated the row. Okay, and it has inserted the row. You see here. Has it inserted the row? Yes. Has it inserted the row? Earlier it was 6 rows. Now it is 7 rows. Now the row is inserted, but why this is not executed means we have moved to insert a row. That means at the move to insert row means the position will be moved to the last position. Okay. If it is moved to the last position, there are no elements. Okay. Any insertion will be done only at the end. Insertion of a record will be done only at the end. If you are moving to insert a row means it will be moved to the end. So at the end there are no records. So if you want to move back to the position, what we do is move to current row. Otherwise, if you want to fetch all the records, let me make it before first, so that it will fetch all the records. Just I will execute before first so that after insertion it will fetch all the records. Now let me insert first column value as 275 and second column value as third column value as 32. Okay. Now let me try to insert the values. Let me try to compile the application. Go to the classes, execute the application. So 100, 200, 255, 300, 400, 500 and 600. Is that newly inserted row reflected here? Is that newly inserted row reflected here? No. That newly reflected row will be inserted, will be reflected only to the next result set. the newly inserted row will be reflected only for the next result set. Okay, but in the database it is reflected. In the database earlier there were 7 rows, but it is 8 rows now. But in the result set it will be reflected only in the next iteration. Now if I execute again, okay, then it will be reflected. So 100, 200, 255, 275, 300, 275, 255. These are the 2 records that we have inserted. But it is giving a constraint exception. Just because already we have a record with ID 275. Again, in the next iteration, I am doing the same thing. I am trying to insert another record with 275, which is a primary key. So it will give an exception. Understood? Understood? Yes? Already there is a record with the ID 275. But if I try to execute it one more time, if I execute the application one more time, already 275 exists. Already 275 exists. So we are trying to insert a record with the same value 275 again. So it is a primary key violation.
So I just want to know that the same thing we can do by insert query and update query for you. So in this scenario, it is preferable to use that result set and there we can use. So the same thing we can do in the insert query.
Let's consider like from the result set, we need to go for something which is like if it doesn't exist, then insert the row. Let's consider like there is a row something like ID 100, name Rajesh, age is 26. That is the row. But I need to insert the row only if that details doesn't exist in the database. Then how I can find that? See, I need to insert a row. ID student, I am a student, ID is 100, name is Rajesh and age is 26. But I need to insert those details only when such details doesn't exist in the database, in the table. Then how you can verify whether the details doesn't exist in the database? Then what you need to do is we need to fetch the results first. We need to fetch the results, we need to write the condition. When the condition is satisfied that there doesn't exist any row, then you should write another, we should execute like another query, execute something. Rather than going for another query, what we do is we can directly make it from the result set itself. In those kind of scenarios, we use updatable result set. Understood? See, what happens, we fetch the results, we check the condition and we get the flag that the records doesn't exist. And again what we need to do, we need to execute the query. That means we need to go for another action plan, which is not correct. Already we have a result set, just we move to the specific position and we will directly insert here itself.
Before that we are not doing that. We are checking the data, then we are
yes.
We directly insert the data.
Yes.
We are not verifying anything. Now we are
verifying the data first, whether that kind of record already exists or not, and then insert the data. Okay? If that is the scenario, then we go for updatable result set. And to delete a row, just we go for move to the specific position, rs dot just we go for delete row. Okay, move to the specific position, execute delete row. That's it. you want to delete a row, just move to the specific position and execute delete row. That's it. To move a specific position, we can go for either absolute or relative or any of the ways. Move to the specific position, go for method delete row, so that the row will be deleted at that position. Just these two statements are enough to delete a row from a updatable result set. So now let's try to execute this application. Compile, go to the classes, execute the application. So earlier it's deleting all the rows up to that point, right? Yeah, it is. It is deleting all the rows up to that position.
We started changing your level.
Up to that. That's when I'm telling. It's deleting all the rows up to that position.
Started changing from that position.
See, absolute of 3 means it will go to the position. That means it will be there in the third position. Oh, sorry. It's not deleting the rows up to that position. It's deleting the row, but since we are at the third position, it's displaying the remaining rows. Sorry, I was confused, to be frank. Okay, it's going to the third position and it is deleting the row at the third position. Okay, and after the third position, it is displaying all the values. Now, earlier, if you see here, earlier 100, 200, 300, third position was 255 Ishwar. Now that record doesn't exist. Okay, so we are moving to the third position and we are deleting the row at the third position. And in the while loop, we are iterating so that it is iterating all the elements from the third position. Since we are at the third position and we are deleting the row at the third position, so in the next iteration, the third position row doesn't exist. Okay, so that's how we can delete a row from the result set. Just go for the position, execute delete row. I was confused. Just it will delete row will delete the rows at a specific position, at a specific delete row will delete a specific row at a position where we have navigated. We are going for absolute of 3 so that it will delete the third row. So since we see here the third row was 100, 200, 255. 255 was the third row. So third row was deleted for the next iteration, for the next execution. Question? So this is how updatable result sets will work. Okay? And to make a use of updatable result set, we should have a JDK 1.5 or a higher version, just because JDBC 3.4 will be available only in JDK 1.5. And while creating a statement itself, we should tell that okay, it should be scrollable and it can be updatable. Okay, and then we can do any operation, either insert or update or any delete operation. Okay, and the next concept is batch updations. Batch updation. Let's consider that the ID now it is a int. I want to make it a string. ID is a int, but I want to make it a string. How I can make? Let's consider that I'm doing like this. Just directly I'm trying to alter the table so that the person underscore ID will be converted into a varchar. Now what happens? Column to be modified must be empty to change the data type. What it tells? There is a data in the column, we cannot change the data type of the column. Not even data type. We cannot change the name of the column, we cannot change what we call the constraints on the column, as well as we cannot change the data type of the column if the column has some data. So first we should flush out the data. Now I don't want to flush out the data. I don't want to flush out the data. What I want to do is I need to take the existing rows 100 and I need to change the value to 100 and I need to insert that value. Understood? There might be thousands of records in the database, okay, in the same table, okay, but just to change the data type of the column I should not flush out the existing record. Let's consider like I have a bank account, okay. At present the bank number is integer. Since the bank number is very big, I want to change from integer to string. Now if that is the case, to change the bank number from integer to string, will I erase all the existing bank records? No. If I erase the existing bank records, the bank will fall down like anything. So what I will do in this case, I should keep the existing data, but I should change the data type. I should not lose the existing data, but I should change the existing data type. But how I need to do? Can I do like this directly? If I have a data existing in that column, can I change the data type of the column? No. If it's not possible, then how I can do that? I have an account number which is an integer now, but I want to change it to a string. But currently there are thousands of records for the specific column. If there are records for the column, we cannot update the data type. That's for sure. So how I can achieve that? Means I'll go for a temporary column. Then what I'll do is, we have, let's consider like person underscore ID, person underscore name, person underscore, which is age. We have 3 columns. Now the person underscore ID is a integer. Person underscore ID is a integer. Name is a varchar. And age is a integer. Now what I'll do is, I have some records 100, Ravi, 20, 200, 21, 300, 22. Like this I have many records. Let's consider like I have thousands of records. But I cannot change the data type of personality from int to varchar as it is. Just because if there is a data in a table, we cannot change the data type of the specific column. If there is data in that column, then we cannot change the data type of the column. Then if I remove the data from the table, I lose the data. So as a temporary measure, what I'll do is I'll create a temporary column like temp person ID whose type is varchar. Okay, and I'll push all the data. I'll push all the data from ID to person ID underscore ID to ID. So Now these are not integers, these are strings. 100 is a string, 200 is a string, 300 is a string, just because it is varchar. Then the next step what I will do is, I will delete the column, I will drop the column. The first step is create which is varchar. Okay, varchar of sum 13. The second step is I will push the data from person underscore id to temp underscore person underscore id. And the third step I will do is, I will drop the column person underscore id, so that the column person id will be dropped. Now, are we losing the data if we drop the person underscore id? Do we lose the data if we drop the person underscore id? Yes or no? Yes or no? For what we have done this? We have created a temporary person underscore id. If we drop the column person underscore id, even in that case we have the data of person id, just because we have that data in the temporary person id. So that first what we will do, we create a temporary column to push the data from the person underscore id to temporary underscore person underscore id, so that the data will not be lost. So the third step what we do is, we drop the column person id. Even if we drop the column person id, that data will still exist in temporary column. Okay, and what we do is, we create a column now it is a varchar. Now it is a varchar. Okay, we create a column person underscore id, we'll recreate the column, we'll drop the column, we'll change the data type to what we call varchar, and move the data. From temporary person id to person id, so that temporary person id is varchar and now person id is also varchar. And as the last step what I will do is, drop the column temporary person id. Okay? Now, if you do all these things, now while performing this, all of you understood these steps? My requirement is to change the person id from int to varchar without losing the data. So what I'll do, first I'll create a temporary person id which is varchar. Okay, first thing I'll do is temporary person id which is varchar. Then the second thing I'll do is, I'll push all the data from person id to temporary person id. Okay, so that this temporary column contains all the data, so that we do not lose the data. The third thing I'll do is drop this column. I'll drop this column and I'll recreate the column to be a varchar data type. Okay, and then what I'll do, I'll push the data from this column to this new column. The new column is a varchar. Okay, and then I'll drop the temporary column. So after 6 steps, what happens? The person ID will be changed to a varchar, but the data still exists. Understood? Understood? Yes? Sure? Understood or not? Yes? Now let's consider like these 3 steps are successfully executed. These 3 steps are successfully executed. Okay? So let's consider like these 4 steps are successfully executed. While executing the 5th step, there is a problem. Let's consider like first 4 steps are successfully executed. First 4 steps are successfully executed. While executing the 5th step, there is a error. Okay? Now, will the 4 steps will it be reverted back? Or the remaining 4 steps, or the first 4 steps that are being already executed, will they revert back? Let's consider like there are 6 steps in the process, and we have executed the 4 steps successfully. We are now executing the 5th step. If there is a problem in the 5th step, are those 4 steps reverted back? Yes or no? Let us see. Okay, I will do this 6 steps in a JDBC application, and let us see will they are those steps reverted back or not.
So what is the requirement of steps 4, 5 and 6? Can't we just keep temporary person ID other than rename it to? Like why we are recreating a new person ID column and then putting the data once again? Because we already have the data. If we just want the column with person ID, we can just rename the column.
But if we want to rename the column, there should not be any data in the column, right? So, what we do is, we'll do all these steps. But while doing all these steps, let's make the 4 steps successful. Let me create an error in the 5th step in the JDBC application. Now, let me go for the first step. What is the first step? What is the first step? Just create a temporary column. Updatable, add a column. It is the varchar 30. Okay. Now I have added a new column. Temp person ID is of type varchar. Just I'll give some time to note it down. Just observe them. Observe what we are doing. The first step is we are altering the table so that we are adding a new column. And what is the second step that we need to do? Push the data from the person ID to the temporary column. So, update x_person. Okay, I am updating the x_person table so that what I need to do, I need to set temporary person ID with the value that exists in person_ID. That's what I need to do, right? Okay, update the column temporary person ID, and I need to push the value from person ID to temporary person ID. So update temporary person ID, update person, set temporary person ID equal to, we should use 2 underscore char. To convert a number into a character, we should use 2 underscore char, which is a inbuilt function in SQL. 2 underscore char is a function which is used to convert some format into a character, a number or date or whatever it might be. So 2 underscore char, just because person underscore id is a number, person underscore id is a number which is an integer. To convert an integer into a char or to convert an integer into a varchar, what we need to do is we should use a function 2 underscore char of person underscore id. So what happens is we have 6 rows, some 100, 200, 300, 400 like that. So what happens is 100 will be converted into 100 and it will be inserted into temp% id. 200 will be converted into 200, it will be inserted into temp% id. 300 will be converted into 300 and it will be inserted into the 10%. Okay, 2char will convert this into this. It will convert a numeric or a date or anything into a varchar. Understood? So I am doing that. Okay, and the next step is, what's the next step? Drop the column person id. Okay, sorry, alter table SU person, drop column person id. Alter the table and drop the column person id. Okay, by dropping the column we are altering the syntax of the table. So alter the table and drop the column. Understood? So as the next step, what's the next step? Let me create an error in this step. Push the data from temp underscore person id to person underscore id. Okay? Let me have an error in this. Oh, did we done the step? Sorry, we did not create person id. We did not create the person id. Let me create that. Add person id, which is varchar. In the fourth step, what we will do is we create a new column person id. Now with person id is varchar. Okay, and in the fifth step we will push the data from temporary person to person. So set person id equal to does this column exist? temp underscore pr underscore id. Does this column exist? No, the column is temporary underscore temp underscore person underscore id. Just because I need to raise an error at this line, I am doing this. So the sixth step, what is the sixth step? Push the data from temporary person id. Fifth step, I am erasing error. What is the sixth step? Drop column. No need to drop the column temporary person id. Alter table HM drop column temporary person. The first step, what I am doing, I am altering the table to add a new column temporary person id. The second step, okay, I am setting the temporary person id with the character converted value of person id, so that I am converting the person id into a varchar, and that varchar value I am setting to the temporary person id. Understood? The third step, what I am doing, I am dropping the column person underscore id, so that the person id will be dropped. First, what I am doing is we have person underscore ID, person underscore name, age. Okay, this is the table which has 100, A, 200, B, 300, C, 400, D. Let's consider like that. So what I'm doing is, in the first step, I'm creating a temp person ID, which is a value. Okay, that's the first step. The second step, what I'm doing, I'm pushing all the values from person ID to the person ID. While pushing, this is integer and this is a varchar, so that integer value cannot be inserted to a varchar. So what I'm doing, I'm converting this integer value into a varchar and then I'm pushing. In order to convert the integer into a varchar, I use a to_char function. Since person underscore ID now it is an integer, to convert the values from integer to varchar, I'm using to_char. So this will be converted into 100, 200, 300. 400. Now these are not integer values, these are string values. This because this is a varchar. And the third step what I am doing, all that table it's underscore person, drop column person underscore ID. So I'm dropping this column. Okay? And in the fourth step what I am doing, all the table h underscore person, add person underscore ID which is a varchar of 30, which is a primary key. Okay, now I'm adding another column, person underscore ID. Now previously it was A, now it is a varchar. And in the fifth step what I am doing, I am updating h underscore person to set the value from this column to this column. Okay, now in this step there is a error. In this step there is a error. In this step if there is a error, let us see what happens. Will it be reverted back to the original state or will the table be in an inconsistent state? Okay, understood the thing? Understood? Understood? If these statements, if 4 statements are executed successful and there is a fifth statement, error in the fifth statement, what happens? The table will be in an inconsistent state. Okay? If there is a error in the fifth statement and the previous queries are reverted back, then what happens? That the table will be in the original position. Understood? See? Is this an inconsistent position? Yes. There is a temporary column but the main column doesn't have any data. If the 4 statements are executed successful, because of the error in the fifth statement, okay, because of the error in the fifth statement, if they are reverted back means it will be in a correct position. But if there are 4 statements successfully executed, there is error in the fifth statement, but the previous 4 statements are not reverted back. Okay, then the table will be in a inconsistent position. Okay, then let us see whether it will be consistent or it will remain in an inconsistent position. Table must have a empty to add all mandatory column. Let us see. Now, what happens? What happens here? There is some problem. There is some problem. Why? This itself is a. Oh. What I'll do is, in the middle, I'll delete all the rows from the column. Sorry, I'll delete drop column person underscore ID. But what happens? What is linear exception? The table must be empty to add mandatory or okay. To add a primary key column, the table should not have a records. Okay. To add a primary key column, the table should not have even a single record, but there are records in the table. Even there might not be records in that column, but there are records in the table. To add a primary key column or any not null column, there should not be records in any. There should not be even a single record. So let me temporarily not make it a primary key. If you want to make it a primary key means by default it will be not null. But if you want to now add a not null column, then the table should not have even a single record. That's a rule. If you want to add a not null column, then the table should not have even a single record. Understood? So let me not make it a primary key. Understood why? A table should not have even a single record if you want to add a not null column.
So as this system you created one column.
But I have created a not null column, which is a primary key. But
in that column you don't have any record. At this step you don't have any record. That column was vacant. But that table.
Yeah. If that column, if we are adding the column that we are adding, if it is a not null column, then the table should be empty. The column that we are adding, if we are adding a new column to a table, and if that column is a not null column, then the table should be empty. The table should not have any records. Just because let's consider like we are adding a column which is a not null, but the property of not null is it should not have any null values. But if we add a new column, by default the values will be null. Understood? See, if you add a new column, what is the default value for varchar? It is null. But we are making it as a primary key and making it as a not null. But what happens? It violates the rule. So they have made a rule that if we are adding a new not null column, then the records in the table should be empty. Okay? So let me not make it a primary key.
When we are creating the column, it gives a constant also in that column. When we are creating a column, that at that time we can give that constant that this column should not be done.
Yes.
Then in the code step we can give the primary key.
See, if you are setting it as a primary key, okay, then what happens? That column should have some value.
So here in code step, when you created that temporary column, then you have not given any
Constant.
So it will take null value in all the columns. But if the creation of that temporary column, if you give that constant, that it should not be null, that this column should not take the null value, then definitely you will make it, and then we can give it the code step that
What we want to do is?
So what we are doing, first we are creating one temporary column. But when we are creating temporary column, we are not doing any constant. We are just
inserting the records.
Because of that reason, it is taking all the by default it is taking all the entries as null. But at the creation of this temporary person ID column, if you give the constant also, that not null. Then in the fourth step where you are giving this column should be primary.
See, the temporary column, the temporary person ID, anyhow it will not contain null values. Just because we are pushing the data from person ID to temporary person ID. Person ID, will it contain duplicate values or null values? No. In the same way, temporary person ID also will not contain duplicate or null values. But at the initial position, if you add a column, it will have null values. If you add a new column, the initial value will be null itself. But if that is a primary key column or a not null column, it will not be allowed. Okay? So I don't make it a primary key column. Let me see. Now let's consider like at the third step itself is a Like at the third step there is a problem. Since at the third step there is a problem, is the table in an inconsistent state? Here it is. Let me. What happened here? Select star from not connect. What do we call? Now, person ID is not there, a name is there, age is there, and temp person ID is there. That means, is this table in an inconsistent state? Yes or no? So, what our requirement is? Our requirement is to make the column as person underscore ID, to remain the column name as person underscore ID, to remain the data type as person underscore ID, but to change the remain the data type, to remain the column name as person underscore ID, to remain the data as it is, but just change the data type of the column. But is that the result now? Is that the result now? No. The person underscore ID column doesn't exist. Temporary person underscore ID column exists. But this is something like intermediate state. Okay? Just because the first statement is executed, the temporary person ID column was added. The second step was executed successfully. Okay? And the data was being pushed from first to person underscore ID to temporary person ID. The third step was executed, while executing the third step, what happened? There was a problem. So the table was in inconsistency. So if there is the problem in the third step, are the changes because of first step and second step reverted? Are the changes because of first step and second step reverted because there is an error in the third step? No. So if that is the case, then the table will become an inconsistent state. Understood? It is not consistent. Like our requirement is to make the column as person underscore ID. The data should be there, but the data type should be changed. But is that the end thing that we got? It is an intermediate state which is not consistent. So what we will do is, we'll make all these statements as a batch. We'll make all these statements to be executed as a batch. So that either all the statements are committed successful or all the statements are reverted. Understood? So, if at least one of the statements has an error, then the whole thing should be reverted back. Understood? If at least one statement has a problem, then the whole batch should be reverted back. So, if there is a problem with the fifth statement, the remaining four statement executions will be reverted back. By default, is it like that? If there is a problem in the third step, are the changes done in the first step and second step reverted back? No. They are not reverted back. Okay? If there is a problem in some steps, okay, the previous steps will not be reverted back. The previous executions will not be reverted back. To achieve this kind of requirements, we will go for batch updations, so that all the statements should be executed as a batch. So that either all the statements are executed or none of the statements are executed. Either all or none. Either all of the statements should be executed or none of the statements should be executed. So, Now, how we can achieve this batch updations? How we can execute multiple statements as a batch? Means, the first thing that we need to do is by default, the statements that we execute using or the SQL statements will be automatically committed to the database. Let's consider like if we execute this. Whenever we execute statement.execute, then itself the impact of the query will be committed to the database. By default, when we execute the execute method, then itself the impact of that query will be committed with the database. Because of that, we got these problems. Okay, when this statement is executed, when this SQL statement is executed, then itself the effect or the impact of that query is committed to the database. And because of this statement, the impact of query is committed to the database. And because of this statement, the impact of the query is committed to the database, and the database column is being deleted. And that column is being deleted. So that person underscore ID is being deleted. Okay, just because the statements, the SQL statements in JDBC, by default the SQL statements in JDBC will be auto committed, will be automatically committed. That means whenever you execute the execute method, automatically the changes will be permanently effective. The changes will permanently affect the database. If you execute any execute method, either execute or execute update or execute query, if you execute any execute methods, the change of that query, the impact of the query will be automatically committed. Now, if any interviewer asks like the auto commit flag of JDBC is true or false by default? True. By default, the auto commit flag of JDBC will be true. So that the JDBC statements will be automatically committed. The statements that we execute, the SQL statements that we execute through JDBC will be automatically committed, permanently affected in the database. By default, the auto commit flag of JDBC will be true. So that through JDBC, if we execute any SQL statements, then automatically the effect or the impact of the change will be reflected in the database. By default, the auto commit flag of JDBC is true. Because of that, if you execute any SQL statements from JDBC, automatically the impact of that query will be reflected in the database. By default, the JDBC auto commit flag is true. Because of that, if we execute any SQL statements from JDBC, because of that, if we execute any SQL statements from JDBC, okay, the impact of that SQL statements, will be automatically and permanently affected in the database. So the first thing that we need to do to go for batch updations is make the auto commit flag as false. The default flag value is true, so that we should make it as false, so that the statements will not be automatically committed. Okay? The second thing that we need to do is we should go for a method add batch, where we'll add all the SQL statements to the batch. We should execute the add batch method so that all the SQL statements will be added to the batch. We should add all the SQL statement to the batch. So add all the SQL statements to the batch. So please don't write, at the end you can write. Okay, we'll be changing this application. So I have added all the statements to the all the SQL queries to the batch, so that they will be executed as a group. So I'll execute method. So all the SQL statements will be added as a batch. Okay, now after executing the execute method, we'll forcefully commit. Okay, then this changes, the execute method changes, the SQL query changes will be impacted. The SQL query changes will be impacted in the database only if we execute the commit method, just because auto commit is false. It means automatically the changes will not be committed. Explicitly, forcefully, we should execute the commit method to make the changes impacted in the database. To make the changes reflected in the database, we should forcefully or we should explicitly execute commit method. But do we require the execution of commit method if auto commit is false? Sorry, if auto commit is true? By default, do we require this commit method? By default, do we require this commit method to reflect the changes in the database? No. Just because the default commit flag is true. That means automatically the changes will be committed into the database. But since we have made auto commit as false, automatically the changes will not be reflected in the database. To make the changes reflected in the database, what we do? We execute the commit method explicitly. Understood? So whenever there is an exception, we will execute rollback. Because of any step, if there is exception, we will roll back the changes. Whenever there is exception, we will come to the cache block. In the cache block, what we are doing? We will roll back the changes. Rollback means reverting the changes. Reverting the changes that we have performed in the transaction. Rollback means reverting the changes that we have performed in that transaction. Just let me not use this tab scroll sensitive and all, just because we are not going for any updatable result set. Now what we are doing is we are adding all the SQL statements to the batch, okay, and we are executing the statement object execute method, and one by one all the SQL statements will be executed, okay, and we execute the commit method. Until we execute commit method, the SQL statements will not be committed. Once we execute commit method, the statements one by one, these statements will be executed. If we go for the fourth statement will be successfully executed. But if you go for the fifth statement, what happens? The fifth statement, there is a exception, so that it will come to the cache block. Now, because of fifth statement, there is an exception, and it comes to the cache block. What we are doing in the cache block? We are executing rollback, so that whatever the queries we have executed in this transaction will be automatically rolled back to the previous position. Okay? That's what we are doing. So, whenever exception occurs, it will come to the cache block, and in the cache block, what we are doing is we are rolling back the changes that we have done in the current transaction. We are rolling back the changes that we have done in the current transaction. So all these 4 steps, all the impact of this, the changes of these 4 queries, or the changes of these 4 statements will be reverted back, will be rolled back. Changes will be done, but they will be rolled back. Understood? The changes will be done, but the changes because of the before statements will be automatically reverted or rolled back. Understood? So let me try to execute the application. After executing the application, we can find it. Now what I will do is, first I will drop the table. So table is not there. Let me recreate the table. Person underscore ID, which has the value as 30. Person underscore name, which is varchar of 30. Age, which is of type int. Sorry, ID is int, right? Previously, the first time ID is int. By the application, we will change it as varchar. Table is created. Let me try to insert some data into the table. One record, 2 record, 3rd record. Fourth record, sixth record, 7th record. Like this, I have inserted some 7 records into the table. Okay. Now let me see what are the records that I have inserted. So select star from. So one is null value. Okay, the last one is a null value. There is no. Let me delete that record. Otherwise, it will be a confusion. Delete from HC underscore person, where person underscore ID is null. So one row is deleted. Now there are 6 rows in the database. Where person ID is int, person name is varchar, age is int. Let me describe the person. Person ID is number, int. Person name is varchar, age is number. Now let me execute this application so that person ID will be changed to varchar and the data will be retained. Okay. Now the first 4 columns will not give any exception. The 5th column will give a exception. Let us see if we follow this approach whether the changes will be reflected. There is a problem in the 5th column, or if there is a problem in the 5th statement, let us see whether the remaining changes, okay, will be reflected, or the changes that are reflected in the previous statements will be rolled back or not. Okay. Now let me try to compile the application. What is the error? Method execute. Huh? What is this? Statement execute. And symbol rollback. Roll B small. stmt dot what's the problem, man? execute execute. If you go for batch updations, then we should execute the execute batch method. And even rollback is also will throw what you call SQL exception. This means that's why I asked you not to note down. So first we create a statement object. We add all the SQL statements to the batch. If we add a SQL statement to the batch, then we should execute the method execute batch. Not execute, execute batch. If we add a SQL statements to the batch, then we should execute stmt dot execute batch. And even the rollback method will raise a checked exception SQL exception so that we have surrounded it in try catch. Rollback B is small. Okay, you can note it down afterwards, but the method is execute batch. So that I have asked not to note it down. So let's compile. Let me go to the classes, execute the application. Notice the link. It tells that batch updation exception, error occurred during batching, resource busy with acquire with some node. So there is some problem while executing this batch. Now let me see whether that impacted the table or not. Has that impacted the table? Has that impacted the table? No. Let me try to select star from person. Has that impacted the table? Has it impacted the data or the structure of the table? No. Earlier, has it impacted the table structure and data? Yes, because it was not a batch updation. Now it is, since it is a batch updation, whenever there is an exception, what we are doing? We are rolling back the changes because of this current transaction. We are rolling back all the changes that we have done because of this current transaction. Understood? This is how SQL batch updations will be useful. Okay? Now you can note down the example. Just you need to, if the interviewer asks you how we can make a batch updations, the first step is make the auto commit flag as false. Okay? And create a statement and then add all the SQL statements to the batch using add batch method. Then execute the method use execute batch. And in the catch, whenever there is exception, it will come to the catch. Because of any SQL exception, because exception in any statement, it will come to the catch. In the catch, just roll back the changes using connection dot rollback. Okay, that's how we can go for batch updations. Understood? Then you can know it.
So we can't do changes that means in a primary column because it can't be again made a primary column.
No, we need to flush out. But in general, the data type of the primary key column will be fixed. Okay, otherwise, what they will do is, if they want to change the primary key column data type, what they will do is they will go for temporary table, so that the table contains all the records, and from the temporary table, they'll go back to the new table. You need not to write the queries, just if you want you can write, but just know the concept of batch updation, that's it. Done? So, as I don't want to use the whole knowledge in a single day, I want to give you some time to practice the things. So, we'll stop for the day, and tomorrow in the morning 6:30, we'll come back once again and try to finish JDBC at most possible. I'm not sure whether I could be able to complete it tomorrow morning, but at maximum by tomorrow evening I will complete JDBC. Okay? Tomorrow morning 6:30 as well as evening 8:30.